Welcome to the PAWSCAST, and now here are our hosts.
Hi, everybody. Today we're talking about the red zone. And on campus, that is a very important time period. We're working with Dr. Ben Brauer, Title IX ADA and EEO Director, Sam Judy, registered nurse at Brady Health, and Cynthia Smith, Chief of Police here at Frostburg State University. So thanks for coming, everybody. I appreciate it. So the red zone is a super important time period, especially at of course, it's at the beginning of the school year. When students get to school until about November, when students are most at risk for sexual assault. So let's begin to talk about what sexual assault is. So, what do you guys think of as the definition of sexual assault?
Well, I can start since we're definition is kind of a legal thing, although I'm not going to speak to Maryland's law specifically. There are a number of degrees of sexual assault in Maryland for the criminal code. It's not really necessary for someone who thinks they may have been assaulted or has a friend who thinks they may have been assaulted to understand exactly what those degrees are. My working definition of sexual offense is really simple. It's that, anytime anyone feels like or anytime someone engages in any type of sexual contact with another individual against their will, without consent. Doesn't necessarily require force, doesn't necessarily have to be sexual intercourse. It can be any contact of a sexual nature.
I think that's a really good definition. Does anybody have anything else they'd like to add?
Yeah, consent is the key. So we
Yeah.
talk a lot about in my presentations. So if uh, anybody watching is an incoming student, you'll see me in your ORI class. One of the things that we go over is making sure that there's no mistake about it, that what both parties are about to engage in um, is clear and consensual.
Yeah, I think that's very important to understand and to understand that consent can be given or it can be taken
Mhm.
away. Yeah.
Yeah, that's important too. Consenting to one act doesn't open the door for consent to everything
Mhm.
there forward. And at any point in the process, any point in the you know interaction between individuals, consent can be revoked.
Yeah.
And the other piece about consent that's important is that if you're incapacitated, you can't give consent. So, in those situations, if there's ever a question as to whether or not the person is of sound mind, in order to be able to give consent, that would probably be a good stopping point, um, to make sure that, again, person that's incapacitated or, heavily under the influence of substance may not be cognitive enough at that point to provide consent.
Right. Absolutely. Because there comes a point where maybe you just can't make the rational choice
Mm.
anymore. Yeah, absolutely. So, can someone be sexually assaulted by their significant other, their friend, or their acquaintance?
Absolutely. 8 out of 10 assault victims know they're the perpetrator that had done this. So most definitely.
Wow, 8 out of 10. That's a really high number. Okay. Um and I think it's really important to recognize that date rape is a thing. Uh you can marital rape is a thing. So those are sexual assaults that can be very traumatic for individuals, and I think recognizing that just because you know the person doesn't lessen the amount of trauma that you're experiencing. So, yeah.
Well,
Uh,
that's really, really true. And, I find still, people, when we talk about rape, sometimes their mental image is some creepy person jumping out of the bushes or, that kind of a thing, an unknown perpetrator. That's really the exception.
yeah.
And I think, 8 out of 10, Sam's statistic, is probably a misrepresentation because many of those date rape type situations go unreported. The
Oh my
largest
gosh,
percentage of them
yes.
go unreported.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a big issue too with the underreporting of sexual assault because so many people hear how other people have been treated, and it's just it's very much an issue of underreporting. So, who do you guys think this affects the most, and how may it happen? How may a sexual assault happen?
So I'll start. What we often see in terms of how it happens is the date rape situation, where there's usually or often some alcohol or drugs involved, and things basically just progress beyond the point where one partner or the other is still granting consent, and that withdrawal of consent isn't honored by the other. Um, it affects, if you think about dropping a pebble into a pond, you can visualize the effect of sexual assault on an individual. Primarily the individual is often physically and psychologically traumatized, and that's an injury that particularly if not properly cared for in the beginning, they may carry that for the rest of their life. It certainly affects friends and family members. Um, so it has a broad ranging effect on a number of people.
Yeah, absolutely. And can men be sexually assaulted? Because we talk about women a lot, and yeah, it does happen to women a lot. So what about men?
Yeah, if we go back to the piece of consent,
Mhm.
anybody can, be in a situation where, either consent was not provided or consent was revoked and not honored. Um, the vast underreporting, a lot of times, statistically will show that it comes from males, and there's
Yeah,
a variety of reasons for that. Kind of one of the more major ones is kind of that sense that it I'm a guy, that's not something that can happen to me. So just a denial that that is something that has occurred. In my office, predominantly deals with when these things occur with female complainants. But from time to time, there are male complainants who will come in as well. So I want to emphasize that my office is here for all students.
mhm,
The process, and we'll get to confidentiality and privacy a little later, but it may be worthwhile to hit upon at this point because if there's a reluctancy to report male or female, want to get that out ahead of anything else. That this is a safe place. The information that's shared here is kept here and only shared with those in a very very tight need to know, and those that report are in the driver's seat as to how I proceed and who I contact on their behalf.
that's good. And I think for men, it's a lot harder because of the stereotypes that are
Mhm.
present in society about men. Like, oh, men would never turn down sex, or men want sex no matter what. Like, there's that mentality there, and then that's not really true at all.
Mhm.
That men can be sexually assaulted too. Yeah.
And I'd just like to add that, sexual assault, if you get back to my original definition, it's one person against the other without consent. And it,
Yeah.
it exists all the way across the gender identification spectrum. And frankly, another area of significant underreporting is probably our trans and gay and lesbian folks who have many reasons to be hesitant to report.
Oh yeah.
Clearly anyone can be sexually assaulted, young,
Yes.
old, across the gender spectrum. It just can happen to anyone.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, Cynthia, because it is very important to consider the whole spectrum of gender and not just men and women. Very, very good point. And the stereotypes, the horrible prejudices that go along with people in the LGBTQ plus community, like that's that's very impactful upon them too. So very good point. So now that we have a good basis for what sexual assault is, let's talk about reporting it. Ben was already like going into a little bit of the information. So who do people report sexual assault to, and what are their reporting options there?
I'll start. There's the three of us that are on this panel as practitioners are certainly reporting mechanisms. You have Title IX, Brady Health, and FSUPD are all choices. Those are sort of the official routes. I also try to encourage folks, they can report to any trusted individual who they can find support from. Um, and so that it's important that, that experience is shared with someone because that's the first step to beginning a healing process, hopefully.
Yeah.
But officially, I think the three folks that are here, Brady, uh, Mr. Brow, Dr. Brauer, and certainly my office, FSUPD, are available.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and another resource to put out there is our CAPS office.
Yeah.
You know, seeking social emotional support um, and disclosing there. The other piece is that whether you're disclosing to Brady Health or CAPS, you can do so in a confidential manner that doesn't have to be then disclosed to my office or university police. Um, and then, if you wish to seek the assistance of either, my office or university police, then again, you're in the driver's seat. You get, you know, to 100%, have that option and kind of make those choices which you're most comfortable with and how to seek assistance.
Yeah.
I
And
think sorry, in the
no, go ahead, Sam.
in the medical standpoint, I have experience with being a forensic nurse at the local hospital. We always say there's three different options when you do report. If you would report like to the hospital or even here at Brady, we can talk about your options. But you have a choice to have like a medical forensic exam that involves law enforcement. We contact law enforcement. They can be in touch with Title IX. There's evidence collection during that exam, and also with the exam, they give you other medical treatment that you may need after the assault. There's also the option of Jane Doe reporting, which is anonymous reporting, which I think is very important to educate on. Because with Jane Doe reporting, you still have the medical forensic exam where they can do evidence collection. But as opposed, you don't contact law enforcement at this time. The victim writes their own report. So there's a paper packet that the victim writes what happened to them. And with this, you are assigned a case number and you have that case number. Your name is not outside the paperwork. There's no visible anything with your name on it. You have the number for the case number. And they'll, during the exam, they'll give you a phone number to call if you choose to move forward with, um, if you want to involve with law enforcement and move forward, then you contact the number and give them the case number. And then that's what starts the process. But also with Jane Doe, you still get all the medical treatment that you would if you would involve law enforcement. And then your third option is if you choose not to do anything, like you don't want to report, you don't want to have any of that done, you don't want to have an evidence exam, you can still have a medical exam where we just check you out, make sure that there's no injuries. You can still get prophylactic antibiotics for sexually transmitted diseases. We can give you emergency contraceptive. And there are also, we can do STI testing as well as pregnancy testing and give you the follow up important resources that you would need. For immediate care and also long-term care after the assault.
Yeah. And it sounds like for you, Ben, and you, Sam, you have the option to report. Is that the same for your office, Cynthia?
Um, you have options when you come to the university police. Obviously, we're the sort of the gateway into the legal system, but we're also in a position to advise complainants or survivors um, in terms of their options. So just because you might come to university police with a concern about a sexual assault does not necessarily mean that we're going to initiate a report. You have options if you come here as well. You can initiate a report; it can be documented, and you can ask that it be no further investigated. The only caveat that I would add to the university police responsibility is we would sort of evaluate the facts of the case and try to determine whether or not there existed a threat to the campus generally. In other words, do we think we have a serial perpetrator? Do we think that because of this report, could there be other victims or future victims? And there would be discussion about that. And if it's clear that there is a threat to the campus, then university police is obligated to take further action. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that the reporting person's name would get out or the circumstances of the case.
Yeah.
But we would try to keep a survivor's information as confidential as possible. But as you know, with a law enforcement investigation, if we're going to thoroughly investigate, then comes an obligation to contact others, figure out evidence, what information's out there. So we're sort of, the least confidential of all the reporting options. We basically, certainly try to keep it as confidential and quiet as possible, but no guarantees because we have other obligations that kind of supersede that as law enforcement.
Right. And that makes sense.
Yeah,
Yes.
and to kind of tap off of that as well, the reports that come to my office, a lot of times, we make a decision together as to whether or not we include law enforcement or not. My general thought, and again, it's not a one size fits all approach, but my general starting point when I do advise folks is that whether or not you think you want to file criminal charges at this point in time, it would be a good idea to involve university or local police officials, just for the fact that if ever there is a need to go down that road and file criminal charges, I'm always of the opinion that if you get your story on record as soon as possible, that allows for the most accurate information to be collected at that given time. And also, um, if 2 months from now you make the decision to go back and say, yes, I'd like to pursue this criminally, you don't have to rehash the issue 2 months from now. You don't have to re-traumatize 2 months from now. And also, again, as I said, it makes the evidence collection and initial process a little bit cleaner and a little bit smoother if the information is gathered right away,
Right.
regardless of whether or not there's going to be a pursuit of further action at that given time. The other thing, as Chief said, my office is also obligated that if, and this is in the going on 5 years that I've been here, not something that has occurred, but if there seems to be a greater threat to the university community, um, we will as a university file a complaint, a Title IX complaint, and then I will be the complainant if the party that reports to me doesn't want to be the named complainant, and that's in that 0.001% of the time where there would be a greater danger. We think that if we don't take action, we're setting the stage for something to happen, in the immediate future to somebody else here on campus. But again, as Chief said, in my process, I'm a little bit better able to keep privacy and confidentiality for that individual that came into the office that initiated that process. But again, I don't want to scare anybody away from the reporting side of things, thinking that that's the road we're going to go. Like I said, in the going on 5 years that I've been here, we've not had one where the university has had to be the named complainant. The other process that we employ is that we have a Title IX team. Chief is one of the people on my Title IX team. So we take a multi kind of perspective approach. If we ever have a case that, I sit there and I think, shoot, man, this is not like anything I've seen before. What should we do? I have, the help of a lot of skilled and experienced folks here at the university that we can go ahead and kind of take a broader look to see, what is the best way to approach this for this individual and for the university.
So if I could, I want to dovetail onto Dr. Brauer's comments there a little bit about this, the Title IX team. I'm imagining that, and I know this goes way back, but I'm imagining that I'm a student and I'm watching this webcast and maybe perhaps I've been assaulted, or I think I've been assaulted, and I'm thinking, and I don't want my name being discussed by this round table of people. I want to assure folks that this is a blind review.
Mhm.
If Dr. Brauer has the information, it's a review of the facts and circumstances of the case without identifying the parties.
Yeah.
And that's how that happens. So, I don't want anybody to think that we would be discussing their situation necessarily around a table with a group of people to decide what to do. It would be, again, a blind
Yeah.
review.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Chief. And
Yeah.
again, I'm kind of thinking back with a smile a little bit, on Chief helped me out one time of, I was so caught up in trying to keep names out of it that I was in the process kind of confusing. And she was like, it helps if you say party A, party B, party C. And yeah, so that's kind of how we do that process. Well, not kind of how we do that. That is how we do the process, that we assign titles to those individuals, not names. And,
Yeah.
you know, that was early on in my 5 years. So I've gotten much better at storytelling thanks to Chief.
Yeah. And it sounds like you guys in your different offices work really hard to maintain confidentiality for the people that are reporting. So that's really important, and that's great that you can do that for them. Um, and so if someone reports to one office, like if someone reports to Sam, do they also have to report to Ben and Cynthia?
No.
No.
No,
And it's in my office, it's if they choose to report to the police or to Title IX, that's totally their option. And of course, there is, exceptions if it would be a sexual assault that would involve like child abuse, or if the student was like a vulnerable adult, or if there was an injury that, you know, that was like from a lethal weapon, an auto accident, things that we don't commonly see here, then we would always have to report. But those are slim to none that I've seen here at the office so far.
Yeah. Okay. And if
Yeah.
someone has a question about it, I'm sorry, Cynthia. Let me just ask this and then we'll come to your point. If someone has a question about confidentiality, can they call up on it and I can't say it anonymously. There we go. Can they call up anonymously and say, "Hey, so can you give me some feedback on this?"
absolutely.
Absolutely.
Good, good, good.
Yep. Yeah.
And
And
Cynthia,
sometimes that's that's how friends sometimes open the door to getting friends help. Is
yes.
that I'll have a call that comes my way, that, hey, um, I'm not going to tell you who this is, but I have a friend who Saturday evening, um, what can I do to help my friend?
Yeah.
Is this something that your office deals with? What are the resources available? What happens if my friend decides to come forward? And so, that's sometimes the very important starting point. Um, in the process is that comfort level that a friend may have, um, to seek just information at the beginning, to help guide their friend when something has occurred.
Yeah, that's a true friend right there.
Mhm.
It really is. And Cynthia, you had a point earlier?
I just wanted to, sort of emphasize that our number one priority is making sure that the survivor gets the physical, medical, and psychological care, self care that they need. Um, it's this, as I said before, this is traumatic, and the most important things are that they get the support and assistance that they need, and that they regain some control in terms of where this goes. Do they want it reported? Do they want it investigated? Because it's a crime that leaves people feeling out of control. And so it's really important to help them and provide them with a sense of control, a control where the investigation goes, control in terms of who they want to report to. Um, and and really, when you come to university police, the only thing we're going to really encourage someone to do is get that self care, that medical and psychological help that they may need. That's where we're going to kind of push the referrals, and just strongly encourage a survivor to follow that path.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. So now that we've talked about confidentiality and stuff like that, let's talk about what happens after the report has. Wait, I want to talk to you, Sam. I want to talk to you about what's it like to do a medical exam.
Do you mean like for like here at Brady or from like
Yeah. Well, with the forensic medical exam, the rape kit.
Okay. So at the hospital, they have specialized nurses. They're the forensic nurses. So they have training. They're very knowledgeable on like sexual assaults. So you would go to the hospital. You would tell the triage nurse at the emergency department that you would like to see a forensic nurse.
Yeah.
The forensic nurse, they have office hours there, but they also are on call. So if they wouldn't be there, they respond to the hospital. Um, so during the medical exam, the nurse explains everything before the exam starts. And the choices, what your choice would be if you want to contact police, if you want to do an anonymous report, or if you just want to do a medical exam, that's totally the patient's choice. There's no pressure; it's whatever they're comfortable with doing. But during the exam, they explain every process. Step by step. The patient can refuse or decline any part of the exam. There's no questions asked. If they just don't feel comfortable with that part of the exam, they are able to decline to have that done. The exam includes a head to toe assessment to make sure there's no injuries, um, just to make sure that the patient, not having any pain that they may not noticed until they're actually asked about it during the head to toe assessment. With the exam, they also will photograph any injuries if the patient's comfortable with that. If there may be a bruising or a tear or something that, doesn't seem like a normal appearance, then the forensic nurse will also take a photo of that injury to go along with the evidence. Um, After the exam, there is an advocate that will come from Family Crisis Resource Center. They'll come and talk to the patient just to make sure that, you know, make sure they're okay, ask if there's anything that they could do, any resources they could provide. Um, if one of the providers from the emergency department, they will come in just to make sure, touch base with the patient to make sure that there's no injuries, just to make sure that their well-being, that they have, if they have any questions, they can always ask the provider too. Um, the nurse will also provide the patient with prophylactic antibiotics to treat for any STIs that may have been passed during the assault. They will also do emergency contraceptive to help prevent against any pregnancy. Um, the nurse provides, resources, and answers any questions that the patient may have.
And can you do that at Brady Health, or do they have to go to the local hospital?
They have to go to the local hospital. Unfortunately, we can't do exams here at Brady Health. Um, However, if the student does not want to have an exam done, then here at Brady Health, we can provide the prophylactic antibiotics. We can provide the emergency contraceptive. We can do the STI and pregnancy testing. And we also can provide resources that patient or student may need.
And if we have a student who doesn't have transportation, how do we get them to the local hospital if they need to have the assault kit, the full assault kit done? Do we have a way to get them there?
From my perspective, if we have an individual who is reporting and they need to go to the hospital, we have and we will provide transportation. The other recommendations, perhaps they don't want to go to the hospital in a police car.
Right.
They can get transportation via ambulance. Oftentimes what we see is they have a friend that will provide that transportation. I'm sure it happens. I know that we have taken students to the hospital for a forensic exam. It's kind of rare that the student doesn't have, someone that they know that can help them get to the hospital.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. So, how long does someone have to be examined after the sexual assault has occurred?
Um, they have up to 15 days to have an exam done. Of course, the sooner you would have an exam done after the assault, the better you have to preserve any DNA evidence that may
Mhm.
have been transferred from the assault. But you have up to 15 days.
Okay.
So from an evidentiary standpoint, the standard is typically 72 hours. And, just to sort of reiterate what Sam said, again, from our perspective, both from a health perspective and from a law enforcement perspective, I always counsel sooner the better.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. That makes sense. So if the victim does the forensic exam, does someone automatically get arrested? Like, does this automatically get reported and suddenly the cops are out after them? Is that how that works?
These are very, very complex and complicated investigations. And
Yeah.
again, the Jane Doe reporting that Sam spoke to is a great, great resource. And that is basically puts an investigation on hold, but has that initial evidence and documentation.
Yeah.
They're very complex, complicated investigations and difficult to prosecute to start with. So again, the longer between the time of the event and the investigation beginning, the harder it gets to successfully investigate. But, sadly, there isn't always a resolution where we can identify or develop enough what's called probable cause. And that's, more than just a mere suspicion. The evidence would suggest to a greater degree that someone probably committed this crime.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, in these types of cases, a prosecutor will often feel as though there's not enough to go forward with prosecution. And again, I said sadly, I think there's many reasons for that, but I think folks need to know that just because you report and even if you know the perpetrator, it doesn't always mean that it's going to result in criminal charges.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a big struggle. Absolutely. And knowing your perpetrator, like students who know their perpetrator, or even if they don't know their perpetrator, they can be really concerned about their own safety when reporting a sexual assault. So when we're looking at that, could um like how do we provide for their safety after giving a report?
Well, I can start on my end in terms of what the university can do. If we're in a situation where somebody wants to come in and be a named complainant, um, I have an obligation to notify the individual who is being accused, provide them their due process rights as well. But part of that is that we can, through my office and then also through student affairs, issue a no contact order um, between the parties, and that protects both parties' interests at that point in time. A no contact, sometimes people will say, well, that's only as good as the person wanting to follow it. But if it's very explicit, how it's written, and no contact means no contact, whether it's through a third party, whether it's online, whether it's over the phone, going out of your way to be in a spot on campus where you normally aren't, just because you know that the other person is. All of those things, and if a party does not follow the no contact, then at that point it's no longer just the issue that was originally reported. It's a secondary issue of not following a directive of the university, and an interim suspension can be issued to that individual. And what that entails is that until they have their show cause hearing with the Office of Student Affairs, um, they're not to be on campus. Um, you know that provides that break point there. Um, and again, the other thing that can occur, if the event is one that is troubling enough to the university, not that it's not troubling to begin with, but that there's a greater concern for student safety. Office of Student Affairs oftentimes would issue that immediate interim suspension, um, and then have a show cause hearing with the alleged individual to kind of provide that breaking point. So those are the pieces that can be put in place if the individual coming in as the reporter, the complainant, um, does not want to remain anonymous or does not want to kind of just have a report on file and have no further action from the university. So those are the things that we can put in place from a safety standpoint. For those that come in um, and aren't quite sure that they're ready to take that step to be a named complainant, we can also, from a safety standpoint, work with the Res Life office, and they're super helpful. They will provide staff to help move an individual. So if there's a concern that I just don't feel safe where I am, I don't want the individual who you know was involved in this event to show back up at my room. We can do an immediate room reassignment to get them in a spot that nobody knows where they are. That's another piece that we can put in place. And again, you don't have to be a named complainant. I don't have to have told the party, the responding party, that you've ever come in. It's something that we can do just as a support service that we provide.
We can provide individual assistance with safety planning, whether it's related to sexual assault or any other concern that a student may have, and that would apply on or off campus. In addition, we offer a service that is frankly rarely used, and that is, an escort service if a student doesn't feel
I've used
comfortable.
it.
Yeah. So if you don't feel comfortable, on campus at night or whatever, this caveat, certainly if we have a higher priority call, crime in progress or something else that we're dealing with, you might have to wait a little bit for that escort. But we do provide that service as well. And all you have to do is call the office here and ask for that. Let us know where you are and where you want to go. And we can certainly accomplish that. We
Yeah.
can also, for, particularly for a victim of a sexual assault, we can do that in such a way that it's a lower profile. So it's not, like an officer walking across campus with you arm in arm, so to speak, right? But, we can stage a cruiser somewhere at an intersection so we can see you coming, and make sure that you get to where you're going.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
the
And
other
I
off the
really,
other off-campus options that we can kind of assist a student through, and especially this is sometimes an option that you know uh, an individual will elect to go through if not only they know the perpetrator, but they've been in a relationship with the perpetrator. Is the peace order or the protective order through the county court, um, and we can go ahead and advise how to go through that process, direct them down to the clerk's office to file the paperwork. Um, again, put them in contact with the clerk's office, find for them when the best time to go down there, because sometimes it's a busy office. There are days and times of the week that are better to go down, and just kind of advise them through that process. And that's sometimes something that's put in place when we're talking about trying to take the steps away from whether it's a short-term relationship or maybe a long-term relationship, getting that distance. And that's not just student to student. That can be one of our students who has had a relationship with somebody prior to coming here to Frostburg, that dates prior to their enrollment. Um, so those are just things that we have experience in and can kind of walk somebody through, because that all can be an overwhelming piece, and trying to
yeah.
navigate and figure that out for yourself while dealing with all the other stressors of the incident or collective incidents that have occurred, is something that we can kind of help folks through.
Yeah.
Thanks for reminding me of that, Ben. That's also a sort of a touchstone that my officers in interaction with a survivor would routinely provide information about that option and assistance as well.
That's great. It sounds like there's a lot of options for making sure that the student feels protected and safe on campus after something horrible like this happens. So that's very helpful. Um, so there are some reasons why people may not report um, sexual assault. And one of them could be that maybe they were underage drinking or using a substance that they're not supposed to. And um, how does that work? Could someone get in trouble if they have been underage drinking or using an illegal drug when the sexual assault occurred?
If that's the case and they're reporting a sexual assault to us, we're not necessarily concerned about that. There're not going to be any charges filed for that. Um, our focus is going to be on that person's well-being and getting them the help they need and taking their report. Now downstream, an investigation in court comes to court. Then it may become an issue in terms of a decision to prosecute. But for that individual to get in trouble themselves, not going to happen.
Yeah.
Good.
And from a university policy standpoint, that is the exact same answer that I would give. We don't work through student affairs with a judicial board review of somebody that's, coming in to report any type of assault. Um, our focus is on, as Chief said, making sure that they are getting the supports and services that they need, um, to address that event that has occurred.
Yeah. And I think that's important for students to hear that if you survived a sexual assault, the university is not trying to punish you. And a lot of people automatically think, oh, well, it's my fault because I was drunk,
Mm.
because I was high, it's my fault. But that's not how it is. And that's not what the university wants to put forth either. They want to help the individual who is the survivor of sexual assault and get them the help that they need and not be punishing towards them. So,
And
good.
and I'll add in another piece to it because again, a lot of the reports that I get are initially from a friend. So by the same token, I've been out drinking. Um, I went with a group of my friends, and there were five of us, and the four of us left, and the one stayed, and the one, you know, ends up being the one that was assaulted. All four of us are under that same protection as the one. So if I come forward and say, hey, I was at this party, this is what I was doing, but I need to let you know that my friend had this experience occur. Um, we're not going to write down Ben Brauer and then circle back to it and then be jumping on Ben Brauer for, you know, underage
Right.
drinking or, any kind of, substance use.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
protected the same as the complainant.
Mhm.
I just want to make it perfectly clear as well. Someone mentioned that survivors often feel as though they're at fault. That's absolutely true in terms of the way they feel. It's
Mhm.
absolutely untrue in basically the facts. It is never, never the person's fault who has been assaulted. It's not
Yes.
their fault.
Yes. 100%. Absolutely. And I think that's important to underline. It's not their fault. Um, so what are some this might be more of a CAPS question, the counseling center on campus, but what are some coping mechanisms that someone can use after being assaulted?
I think the best thing is self care. You got to take care of yourself. Try to get rest. Try to eat a well balanced meal. Exercise if you can. And I know that's, sometimes they're hard to do after you've been assaulted, but it's very important to take care of yourself. I know I tell a lot of patients journaling. Journaling is a great way to get your feelings out. It doesn't have to be complete sentences or like anything like professional. Just jot down, whatever comes to your mind. If it includes drawing pictures or anything at all, just get it out. And, I also tell patients, you don't have to keep those journals. You can rip it apart as soon as you write it. But just, I think getting your feelings out is so much better than just keeping everything, bottled up.
And
Yeah.
if we're talking red zone, again, the time period between the start of the semester in November, there's a lot of stressors already, especially if you're new to college or if you're in your third or fourth year of college. There's a lot of stress that's naturally occurring during that time span of getting back into the swing of things, getting to your classes, managing your time with your classes. One of the things that my office can do, um, and again, um, this is all without divulging any of the details of what's occurred. Uh, I always will offer a student who comes to me um, the opportunity for me to reach out to their professors on their behalf. And it's always a message that I send after I've given the individual, the complainant, the opportunity to review to make sure that they're comfortable with it. But it's a pretty generic message, which it goes somewhere along the lines of, um, I'm just reaching out on behalf of Ben. He's been in touch with my office, working through an issue that has occurred. As a result, he may miss some of the classes. He may need extra time on assignments to be turned in. Ben will be in touch with you to create a plan to stay on track to meet all course requirements by the end of the semester. And just taking that weight off of a student can then get back to what Sam is saying, you know, prioritizing how you kind of step by step try to get back to close to normal as you can after the incident has occurred. So I want students to know, and I've again going on 5 years here. I've never had a professor get back to me and say, "What do you mean? I got this test coming up. I need more detail," or "Absolutely not." That our faculty is super supportive here. Um, as soon as as soon as I reach out to them, um, if there's any contact back other than thanks for letting me know, I'll work with. There's one of support where it's let me know what else I need to do,
Yeah.
and it regardless of where we are in the semester, it could be finals week, and faculty are very understanding in extending that window of issuing incomplete. So you know you're here obviously because it's a university. You come through the door with that being your top priority, but when something of this magnitude happens, this is one thing that we can kind of drop to the bottom of the priority list,
Yeah.
to help you get back on track and not also at the same time lose out academically.
I always align that with like if you were sick and
Mhm.
like God forbid you got COVID or something, you're going to be excused from your work that isn't online. So, you get a doctor's note for that. And it's the same thing, even if it is more of a trauma based mental issue, you still can get a note for that and it's still valid, just as a note for having COVID would be a valid note. So I think that's really important for students to understand that doing the self-care and prioritizing themselves over other stuff is just really necessary afterwards. Very good points. So do you guys know if there's a support group or someone to talk to after the assault happens?
Caps, for sure, caps. Definitely a resource for that. Um, I might suggest you might actually want to do a webcast with caps
That's
on
the
what they
plan.
do. Yeah, so caps is a great resource. We have great staff down there. They're very busy, but a case like this, I'm sure, would bubble to the top. So
Yeah.
yeah, I would say caps. I think Family Crisis Resource Center may also be a resource. I'm not familiar with support groups they have, but I would kind of be surprised if they don't, or at least have someone there that would be supportive, someone you could talk to.
I know, speaking like what Chief said, I do have connections with Family Crisis Resource Center, a very good working relationship with them. And they do have advocates, they have counseling available. They don't have any like support groups right now going on, but if you want to speak to somebody like in the counseling department, they can do it like at their office in Cumberland. They can also do it via the like a web meeting, and also if they want to meet in person, one of the advocates or the counselors will come up here. Like we said, they could use Brady Health as an office, and they could meet with the student on campus just to talk to somebody about it.
Great. So Ben was talking earlier about how he often has the friends come in and say, "Okay, so I have this friend who what do I do? What does someone do if a friend was sexually assaulted? And how can that friend be supportive and help?
Well, the first thing is, just being that friend who listens and non-judgmental, just being there and also at the same time respecting your friend's privacy. So, um, allowing the friend to share what they want to share without prying too much in, really kind of allowing your friend to seek the support from you on their terms.
Yeah. And I think that's really important. That's something they teach us in counseling. Like, don't dig for the gory details. In the time, like these kids have grown up with Criminal Minds as a TV
Mm,
show and stuff like that. So don't dig. Just ask questions that are about how do you feel? What are your thoughts about your experience? Try not to be too like how did it go down? Like no.
mhm,
So being loving, caring, and compassionate is the first thing that they need. Absolutely.
As a friend, you need to remind your friends that this wasn't their fault, and that
Yes.
you believe what they're telling you. Be supportive and with that too. Just make sure that they know that this is not their fault.
Yeah.
That what Sam just said is really important because, these students are peers and, the friend may also know the perpetrator and maybe like not know that side of the perpetrator that could do something like this. So it's really, really important just to be supportive, believe the person that's disclosing to you.
Yes.
Because, in my experience, false reports are like super rare because I mean, it's traumatic to something to report anyway. So to me, why would you do that if it didn't happen?
Right.
and the other thing is kind of be a, a filter. And what I mean by that is if you are part of a friend group, because again, if we're talking red zone, a common thing that I see is we all went out together. We met up with this group. Um, again, the scenario I gave, five of us went out as friends. I met up with this other group of friends. Four of us decided we were going to go to another spot, leaving one behind. Um, that carries with it after the event, you know, multiple versions of stories, multiple opinions, and be that filter. Just because somebody in that friend group said something or voiced an opinion on what occurred does not mean that that needs to be carried back, um, you know, to the individual who experienced it. Kind of in your own mind as a friend, think is the information I'm about to share uh, potentially helpful or potentially hurtful, um, and again, kind of keep that kind of awareness. I get it that you know you may think that you're doing good by sharing with them, hey, I just talked to so and so, be aware that they said this or that. In the end, um, that may not be helpful information for that individual, and it may not only kind of stress them when we're in a time where we're trying to reduce the level of stress for that individual, but it may also, without you knowing it, without you even intending it, may re-traumatize that individual because it's an additional hurt that's being put on top of something that they didn't plan for occurring that evening that you all went out to have fun.
Yeah, honor that friends being comfortable enough to share that with you, and honor that by maintaining that confidence and supporting their wishes and supporting them.
Yeah. I think those are all extremely valid ways to help out and to be a real support for your friend. Those are great ideas. And most important to this whole conversation is how can we prevent sexual assault? So, what are the warning signs that someone may be at risk for a sexual assault?
Before warning signs, I want to kind of just go back to the red zone kind of thought process here. That it is this time period between arriving here at the university and kind of getting settled in right before Thanksgiving, and kind of getting into your groove of things. Um, Again, I don't want to characterize every story that I've heard, and I don't want to say that this is always how this happens. But one of the key things, this may be the first time that somebody's been away from home, living on their own. So from the very onset, when you come to campus, um, maybe kind of setting down, just making mental note of your own boundaries, things that you want to, okay, I'm going to have somebody over to my dorm room. What does this look like? What do I need to let them know about my expectations for how I want my friends to be in my dorm room? I'm going out tonight with a group of friends. What are those boundaries? Hey, we're going to go over here to this party. It's really important to me that we leave together. Don't leave me there. If you want to leave, that's cool. Just tell me, we'll go somewhere else. Those types of things, so that going into it, we limit. You can never totally prevent, but you can limit being placed in those situations where you're uncomfortable and you're feeling that this is way beyond the bounds of what I anticipated getting myself into. So kind of boundary setting for yourself, expectation setting for yourself up front, and clearly communicating that with your friends, um, in a way that, again, isn't coming from a 46-year-old guy. I'm not going to try to pretend to give you the language of how to communicate that, but within your own comfort level with your own peer group, kind of setting those expectations and boundaries.
I'm gonna look at it kind of from the male perspective, from the potential perpetrator perspective. You're young. This is arguably the best time of your life. You're here in order to get an education, but also have some social experiences. Um, and for the males who might be watching this, I mean, think about having a sexual interaction with someone who either you don't know or you just met or you do know but you've been drinking and you haven't talked about your any sexual nature with your relationship. Think about that consent, right? That is the key. And unfortunately, alcohol is a big first thing that goes is your inhibitions, right, and your judgment. So I think Ben's point about thinking ahead and planning for specific scenarios that you might find yourself in, and thinking about it on the front end, and also thinking about that with your group of 4 other friends that you're going out with, and understanding that as the night wears on, you might begin to feel differently, right? But having someone or a couple people in that group to be sort of, the I'm going to use chaperones because that's the only word that comes to mind, but to be there to remind you that, hey, Cindy, is this really what you want to do? Maybe we should just leave. So thinking ahead and planning ahead, I think, is really important.
Yeah.
And this goes along with what both Ben and Cindy said. Two things. First of all, be a friend that you would want somebody to be a friend to you, like how you'd want that friend to be to you. It is very important to like to set the boundaries, that check in, and not just to leave your friends. Like I know, we all know if they say, "I'll go," go, it's okay. Is it really that okay? You need to set those boundaries before you even go out, and just be the person that you would want them to be to you. And second of all, to go along with like how if you are out, have a backup plan. Always have a plan B. If you're at a party or you're out somewhere and say that, your friends do leave you, have a backup plan. Like you have cash to call a taxi or you have a phone number that you could call for a safe ride. Just have a backup plan in case you are in that situation. So it makes you less vulnerable to depend on people that you don't really know.
I think those are all really good um, tools that students can use to protect themselves. Having friends who are there to protect them and hold them accountable, and being mindful of what your plans are. All of that is really good ideas to help students to make the right decisions, and also um, for people, males that are out in the community and thinking about, like, hey, if you are thinking ahead enough to put a condom in your wallet, then maybe you should think about what else goes along with that, and how to approach that. So yeah, those are really good examples. Um
And,
so
and the not leaving somebody alone, or not leaving somebody,
yeah.
doesn't mean, just doesn't mean, we were at, you know, 123 Main Street, and now we're going to go to, you know, 456 Maple Street.
Mhm.
It could be, I have, we're at this house. I haven't seen Ben, you know,
Yes.
in about 40 minutes. He said he was going upstairs. Um, check in, you know, are you still here? You know, find that friend at that location. Because again, just kind of giving you, you know, some things that have come my way. It doesn't mean that we left to two separate places on a map.
Yeah.
We lost sight of somebody within the exact same place we were, um, you know, and didn't give a thought to. I wonder where they are. You know, they didn't leave. So just again, making sure that you have those, you know, opportunities to check in with your friends, and you know, make sure that as a group you're safe, and that
Yeah.
goes, you know, male and female. You know,
Abs-
as Chief said, you know, as the guy, um, you know, think to yourself, is this going, play the tape forward? Is this going to look the way I think it's going to look? Um, you know, 45 minutes from now, 2 hours from now, 2 days from now, and if
Yeah.
you kind of have a thought, you know, hey, she's been drinking a good bit, or she can't make it up the stairs. That would be a point that, you know, you kind of reflect back on those boundaries that you set for yourself, so that you don't get yourself in a situation that you didn't intend to get yourself into,
Yeah.
along with
Absolutely.
the other individual.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think those are really good tools for people to use to prevent sexual assault. So, when and how should someone intervene if we think we see a sexual assault about to happen or in the process?
Well, I'll tap off of, you know, that group, that friend group. So if you see that your friend has had too much to drink, um, you know, they may be upset with you in the moment. That they may be telling you, no, 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 you know, I'm fine, leave me alone. But you know, the next day they're going to thank you if you kind of corralled them in and said, no, it's time for us to go. It's time for us to go. Um, you know, so that's one way, you know, to kind of keep check. Um, and it may not be sexual assault that you're preventing them from. I mean, there's a whole host of other things that can go wrong,
Yes.
when that individual is in that state. So it's just a general good rule of thumb, you know, to make sure that, you know, if you see that somebody has had, you know, too much, you know, or the other piece to it, you know, you just get that feeling, the hairs on the back of your neck stand up, that hey, we came to hang out with this group. Now all of a sudden we're morphing into this other group. That doesn't seem like, I just don't feel good about this.
Yeah.
It's okay to speak up and say, I don't feel good about it. Like, this isn't who we came to hang out with. Let's call it a night.
Yeah.
That's
And
really important what Ben said, that friend group certainly, and I would, you know, in the pre-thinking ahead, you know, with that friend group, have a plan. What if, right? What if this happens? What if we think that someone's going to be hurt here? So they have a plan, and an understanding that they are going to intervene. You know,
mhm,
certainly if it's, you know, a sexual offense, in the act at the time, if there's any potential or fear for personal safety, you know, certainly you always have the option to call the police, call 911. Right. That's probably not what's going to happen.
right.
But, you know, individual safety is really important as well. And so, but that friend group, and having a plan and talking about it ahead of time is key.
Yeah.
And that works for the guys too, you know.
Yes.
You know, if there's this friend group of guys and they see, I'm just going to use Ben, not that he would do this, but just because he's here, you know, that Ben is interacting with this one girl who looks like she's really intoxicated, and it looks like it's getting really friendly. There's an opportunity to intervene, for Ben's friends to say, hey Ben, no, I don't think you're going where you want to go. Might seem like the right thing tonight, but you're going to regret it. And just prevent that from happening.
Yeah.
And I think also, I know we've talked about the friend groups and stuff too, but actually anybody can intervene. Like if you see something happening or going to happen or that doesn't feel right, you can create a diversion, like go over and talk to that individual that could be at risk. Or if you maybe know her from class and she's friends with another person, enlist other friends to help you create like a diversion or a distraction that, help that at-risk person get out of a situation that she or he may not be able to,
Mhm.
you know, get out of.
Yeah,
So anybody
absolutely.
could, like anybody can
Mhm.
help, you know.
Yeah. We can just stop and ask, like, hey, are you okay? Do you know what you're doing? Are you with it? So I think that's super important too. And I know from a social psychology perspective, they've done lots of studies on people who have been assaulted. And they found that many of them had that hair up on the back of their neck feeling before it happened. So there was something that they just felt like this isn't right, this isn't my spot, I shouldn't be here, but they brushed it off and ignored that intuition that they had. And it's better to pay attention to that intuition and be like, "Oh, well, maybe I missed out on something fun," than to not listen to that intuition and have something horrible happen to you. So, I definitely agree.
That's a super good point. And, when I speak to groups on general safety, I often tell them that if something doesn't seem right to you, it probably isn't because, as a law enforcement officer, we develop that sixth sense
Yeah.
of something isn't quite right. But
Mhm.
that every human being, I believe, has that. I think it's a survival mechanism that still is with us from, way long ago.
Yeah.
And learning to listen to that, whether you want to call it intuition, sixth sense, instinct, whatever, I think is extremely important because often when that hair starts rising in the back of your neck, there is something going sideways.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think logically we try and explain it away, but if that's there, then there's something going on.
Yep.
And I'd rather be wrong with my intuition than be right and not listen to it. That's my philosophy. So, um, is there anything else that you all would like to talk about that we haven't touched on today?
I just want to say that, I know our students who come from the more urban areas, metropolitan areas, often view the police in a way that's negative, that when the police are involved, I'm in trouble or somebody's in trouble. What we try to do is kind of change that perspective, that perception. We really are here to help our students. And it doesn't mean that, if you're doing something wrong, we may have to do something that's enforcement related, but by and large, we are here to try to help make that really tough transition from young adult to adult by the time they leave here. And so I just want to make that point.
Yeah. And I definitely want to echo that. Talking to students on campus, I hear often from them like, "Oh, Chief's awesome. Chief helped me with this issue, or Chief did this, or the police officers did this and really helped me out." So yeah, it's a different experience for many of them, and it's been a positive experience for many of them. So yeah, absolutely, our campus police are here to help. And I think that is very important to underline. They're not here to punish, be mean, just hoard power over you. No, they're here to help you. And the university and chief has really dedicated themselves to making sure that's how it works. So thank you, chief. Anybody else have anything else they want to add?
Yeah, I always leave presentations with if you don't remember anything, don't remember my name, don't remember where to find me. If you just remember title IX, it's the Roman numeral 9 IX, not like 9 on a clock, but IX, title IX. If you type that into the search bar on the Frostburg State webpage, it'll bring you to my page and everything and more than what we talked about today: resources, procedures. Um, assistance, reporting opportunities. It's all there. And that way, in a pinch, if you don't remember anything, but remember title IX, you'll be able to get to me and I'll be able to help and assist any way I can.
Absolutely. And Sam is up at Brady Health. Go ahead.
And here at Brady, if you have any questions or concerns, or if you need just somebody to talk to, you're more than welcome to come in, call. We can talk to you about your options, what choices you have, and then we also can, just be here if you just need to talk to somebody as well. Just remember you're not alone, and that you know we believe you, and and
Absolutely.
then it's not your fault.
Yes. Yes. 100%. Yes. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for today. I really appreciate you guys coming in to talk to us about this. I think this is a super important uh, topic for students coming back to fall, and I hope that a lot of students will watch this. So, if anybody has any questions, you can of course contact Title 9. You can contact campus police, and you can contact Brady Health. You can also contact the counseling center on campus called CAPS. You can come to the SAFE office here and talk to a peer educator. There are all sorts of options, of course, Residence Life, and I'm sure I'm forgetting like 5 others, but there are a lot of options here on campus for you to get help. So please feel free to seek out help when you decide you need it. So thank you, everybody. I appreciate your participation and have a good day.
Thanks
You
for
too,
putting this together.
Manuel. Thanks for getting us together.
Yep.
Thank you for being a part of our PAWSCAST. This Health and Wellness podcast is brought to you by the Prevention Center and the Peer Education Network at Frostburg State University. If you would like more information about our programs, visit us in Pullen Hall 109 or call us at 301-687-4761. Or you could also send us an email at safeoffice@frostburg.edu.